It was in that year that I learned two things. A stranger was living in our home, and my husband had been cheating on me whilst I was pregnant. This happened in 1994. My now ex-husband James and I were excitedly awaiting the birth of our second child. I worked as an architect, and he owned his own construction company. Things were going great. Just a month prior, we had purchased our second house from a slender, middle-aged man who was unkempt, but appeared kind. His eyes were incredibly depressing, as though he had gone through a lot. He had clarified that his own daughter and her husband had relocated to Canada, along with his grandson. The wonderful memories in this property made it hard for him to sell up and move on to a boat. The man said he hasn't had time to clean up the attic that was situated above one of the bedrooms, but it needs to be done. He insisted that he would take care of it, even though we volunteered to help. He appeared somewhat innocent, and in those bygone days, we relied on the word of everyone. We were used to having the front doors unlocked and the windows open, and everyone's words were like gold. But that was the age we used to live in. We were in no rush, so we told him it was acceptable and to come back whenever he felt like it. We were accustomed to remodeling and creating homes, so even though the house wasn't in the best of shape, it wouldn't have been a problem for us. After a few months, odd occurrences began to occur in the house, particularly with our son. But let me start by discussing the house. The first things that went missing were the plates and silverware, then other foods from the refrigerator. James worked long hours, so I was used to him eating later than usual, so I didn't give it much thought. He would leave our son off at daycare and then go to his building sites whenever he needed to, while I went into the office in the morning. That was always the way it would be. Our son started to change gradually. He was a quiet, introspective child who was quite shy. When we would put him to bed at night, I would hear faint laughter coming from his bedroom. This didn't always happen, but occasionally I would check in on him to see what was going on when the giggling developed into laughter. He would be laughing and playing with his toys in the poorly lighted room. My son's eyes were like marble dolls, with long, curled lashes, and he had canines resembling vampires. He used to refer to his father and myself as Mom and Papa. He said he was having fun with Charlie. As I carefully examined every angle of the room, the hairs on the back of my arms rose up like razor-sharp pins. Nobody was present. Tucked him in and shut the door, telling him rather strongly that it was time for him to go to bed. I walked back down the hallway and into my room, grinning awkwardly as I shook my head at his unending laughter. For 2 weeks, the giggling would not stop. While taking a shower one morning, I observed that my bar of soap began to feel lighter and looked much smaller. I felt this was weird because I take 2 showers a day, and it shouldn't be draining this quickly. My everyday perfume, which was also in the bathroom, experienced the same thing. I reasoned that I must have been forgetful because everything had been so frantic. I was purchasing brand new bars of soap virtually every week and a half because it had gotten that terrible. I asked my husband, since I knew he had his own soap. For a moment, he appeared startled, as though he was going to burst out of his own skin. I didn't give it much attention until he answered in a tone that was both confident and trembling. He shot back with a question as the tension in the room grew. It was almost accusing. "Why are things running out so quickly?" he asked me. I instantly froze. I had nothing to say in reply. At that moment, I heard our son laughing and running around our house. His duck-like feet slapped the ground beneath him. I said sorry to James and went to go check on our little boy. We both met in the corridor, and he had a slightly crumpled piece of paper in his hand. He wanted to be a house drawer, as he would put it, so I had assumed he had drawn something for me. He appeared to be carrying the weight of the entire planet as I looked at him. I questioned him about the issue. Though he was pouting, it seemed as though he wanted to cry. I asked him again what was wrong, but he didn't answer. The sad boy, overcome with emotion, confessed to me saying, "Charlie never wants to come out and play with me. He wants to play with me only at night." I smiled and said, "Perhaps Charlie is a little bit like you, but not as special as you." I joked to him. I told him this because I knew he would find solace in the knowledge that his teeth were sharp. He loved vampires. Always told him he was a special one as he could walk in the sunlight. He lowered his head and gave me a piece of paper. When I looked at the drawing there, I saw a man hanging from the ceiling. My husband arrived in the hallway after I called him, and he moved slowly. His expression was twisted and worried. James asked our son where Charlie is now. He said that Charlie was playing in his room, but that he always came by every night. That night, I couldn't sleep because of my extreme concern. While our son was giggling as usual, I noticed some slight vibrations resonating through the walls this time. Far raspier, deeper tone. James woke up when I told him what I had been hearing. At the time, he carried a pistol, which he kept hidden in a box under our bed. When he was ready, we gently made our way down our dimly lit hallway and into our son's room. He had ordered me to wait, so I did. The chuckling increased in volume and a deep voice was audible. My husband lunged in the direction of the door and kicked it. The door remained closed. He twisted the circular knob feverishly in an attempt to open the door. We recognized the man who had sold our house as soon as the door flew open. He was standing behind our son. They appeared to be engaged in some strange form of hide and seek. The man looked up yelling in a panic, but it was already too late. Though I was afraid for our son's life, I didn't think James would shoot him. The man seems to have felt the same way, yet he leaped out the window in a panic, fearing for his own life. I heard a flat thump. I believed him to be dead. I don't really recall what happened when my husband took my son, but I did hear the man groaning somewhat. I am happy and grateful that he was still alive. Charlie was taken in an ambulance after being placed under arrest. The police said the man wanted me to read his statement a few days later. James took me down to the station to read it because I was terrified at first, and of course our son was around. We waited at the station. When we got there, an officer spoke to me after a while, and he gave me a somber smile. He asked, would I like to read the testimony by myself? Gave him an odd look, then turned to face my husband, and shook my head. With a sigh, the officer replied. I started crying uncontrollably as soon as we entered the side room. Even now, I still find it hard to believe what the statement revealed. It loosely said the following. I have been living in your house for a few weeks now. I sold the property wrongfully, and I am aware that this is wrong. There is no one there for me. Your little boy reminded me of my own grandson. My only daughter and grandson have moved far away, and I miss them dearly. He is such a wonderful little guy, and I would never do him any harm of that sort. Encouraged him to keep drawing, as he had previously told me that he wanted to become a house drawer just like his mom when he grew older. I figured he meant a designer of some kind, maybe an engineer or architect. He would always giggle because I would play with him when he was feeling down. I asked him why he was so sad. He told me that he didn't want Papa to go. He told me that when the bedroom doors were closed, he would hear praying from a lady who would come around. He would hear them shouting things like, "Oh Jesus, I'm coming," and hear knocking noises. He therefore believed he was leaving. The letter continued to say that the man had indeed eaten our food, but I was done caring at that moment. It explains why my soap and perfume was running out so quickly. The woman had been using my things. No wonder why James was nervous when innocently confronted him about it. Not long after, I filed for divorce. In a strange way, I am thankful that the man was discovered in our home. So thank you, Charlie. My mind was racing with concerns as I sat in the tiny, unclean office of my son's primary school. How could anything be so worrying that the teachers wanted me to come over right away? Anxiety made my heart tighten while I awaited the principal's arrival. The principal came in. He expressed regret for any problems caused and inquired about my well-being. I could sense the weight of imminent bad news settling in the room from his serious look. Asked him, "What's going on? Is everything all right with Jack?" Jack is the name of my son. With a sigh, the principal looked down at a document on his desk before looking up at me again. He slowly said, "It's about Jack's drawings. Specifically, one drawing in particular that has been causing some concern among the staff and students." He handed me a piece of paper from the folder. It was an innocent, childlike sketch of a long-haired elderly woman with her arms wide, soaring through the skies. The said, "There have been rumors about the woman depicted in this drawing, and they have been circulating among the students. A handful of the children claim she's flying around observing them, which has worried them. Without a doubt, Jack created it." Then I realized who he had been drawing. He had been present in the room during a conversation I had with my wife about a lady who used to be a classical pianist back in the 60s. Her story is incredibly tragic. I will name her as Amelia out of respect for her privacy. She was previously a well-known pianist who wowed audiences with her incredible skill. But as the years went by, her wealth diminished and she was forced to live on the streets, hiding out in cars that were provided to her and wearing shoes made out of garbage bags. She had apparently fallen into a deep mental struggle after a breakup with an old lover back when I must have been a child. Her once glamorous life reduced to mere survival on the unforgiving streets of our city. Tragically, her story came to an abrupt end in 2015 when she was struck by a lorry, leaving behind a legacy of unfulfilled dreams and untold sorrows. As I pondered the tragic story of this woman who had captivated my son's attention, a lump formed in my throat. I muttered, "I had no idea," as my mind strayed to Jack and the innumerable questions that must be racing through his impressionable head. With a sympathetic nod, the principal said, "We're worried about how it's affecting the other pupils. The thought of a flying lady observing them truly terrifies a few of them." I understood and nodded, appreciating the principal's understanding and patience. It was obvious that we had to deal with Jack's obsession with Amelia in a tactful and productive way to make sure that neither his creativity nor his classmates' feelings were unduly distressed. Amelia's story was a reminder of the fragility of life. I was living in a somewhat rundown apartment. There was a tiny opening in the wall corner where the majority of the pipes coming from the bathroom entered my room. I knew that co-parenting with my ex-girlfriend wasn't the best arrangement for my two daughters, yet I still did it. I was halfway between jobs and had recently lost my primary source of income, so money was tight. I wanted to get out of there. This should only last a little while. 3 days a week, I was with the girls. Every time they came over, I would notice that as I laid in bed, I could smell something foul coming from the pipes. I reasoned that perhaps the drains are full or something. I even gave the landlord a call and asked him to send for a plumber to fix it, which he did. The plumber did inform me that although the pipes are old, they appear to be in good functioning shape. I wanted everything to go well because I knew the girls would be visiting over the weekend. As the weekend arrived, my oldest daughter looked unwell. I asked her how she was doing. She gave me a hug and said she was fine. She looked tired. Asked her if she had eaten before she came, and she told me yes. Her breath had a little acidic, rather rotten odor to it. Similar to vinegar, almost. Since I don't do acidic things, my ex-girlfriend had always called me dramatic, so I figured it was probably just that. Asked her to go chew on a stick of gum. Our family ethos has always been that it's better for a loved one to inform you if you have a terrible breath than for a stranger to do so as well. Lily, my youngest, was an avid sketcher. Her passion was in Japanese cartoons. She didn't like it when I called them Japanese cartoons, but I can't recall the exact name for them. At the moment, she'd made me into a comic book villain. She gave me a name, Flame Man. She insisted that this drawing remain on the kitchen refrigerator door, so I put it there. When it came time to make dinner, we decided to make homemade pizza as they loved it, and it was very simple and enjoyable. When it was time to eat, the oldest child kept vanishing from the living room, where she regularly ate with her sister. After Lily was done, I asked her to see how her sister was doing. She nodded and left to go look for her. My oldest child, Sophie, wasn't feeling well when Lily had told me, so I assumed she was in the bathroom and didn't give it much thought. We had our normal weekend after I made her some tea, in the quiet hours of a Sunday evening, surrounded by the straggles of a weekend spent with my girls. My eldest, Sophie, was engrossed in her reading. Lily was stretched out on the floor with her crayons in a rainbow of colors. My heart pounded when I saw the drawing I was looking at among the pile of papers Lily had left behind. Lily had made a comic hero version of Sophie. I saw a childlike drawing of Sophie. A ragged line behind her showed something ejecting from Sophie's mouth and into what appeared to be bottles. Confusion knotted my brow as I studied the drawing. Why would Lily draw her sister in such distress? And why did it seem like Sophie was vomiting? I realized at that point. Asked Lily over and suggested that we play a game of whispers. Tell me, where did you see Sophie use her superpowers? I whispered in her ear. With a nod, she whispered next door. I got up and went to the bathroom next door. There was nothing in the bathroom that I wasn't expecting. In comparison, it was tidy. Lily stormed in and told me that it wasn't in here, but it was in their room. I didn't think to check their room since I wanted to give them some privacy. Especially Sophie, because I knew she would always let me know if she needed me, and she was getting older. It was stronger this time as I opened the door and smelled that horrible, acidic stench. Much more powerful. The stench was faint but strong enough to make me sick to my stomach. I could feel the acid rising in my stomach. I wondered how long this has been going on and assumed Lily is oblivious to the smell. I was still not seeing any indications of vomiting. I looked everywhere but the drawers by the bed. Since the room wasn't very big, it would be difficult to cover up any stains or clothes. I gritted my teeth and tightened my stomach as I cautiously opened the drawer, hoping not to gag and end up throwing up. Even though what I saw was disgusting, I was heartbroken. There were 3 little transparent plastic bottles. 2 of them had a consistency similar to lumpy cottage cheese. The other was a little murkier but still more clear. My poor daughter had nothing but bile after throwing up so much. I yelled out to Sophie, I was worried and asked her to come over. Her eyes guarded, she approached with a tentative smile. "What's this?" I asked. Sophie blushed with shame when her smile wavered and she looked away. She eventually broke down and revealed the truth she had been keeping, tears welling up in her eyes. She had been battling with an eating disorder for months. She was sick to her stomach at the sight of food and had taken to forcing herself to throw up in order to get over her nausea. I was left reeling from the realization, which felt like a physical blow mixed with remorse and agony. How did I not notice the signs? How could I not have noticed the suffering my child was going through in silence? But in the thick of everything, I also realized that Sophie wasn't the only one going through this. I had been kept in the dark about this by my ex-partner, who is the mother of my children. She had chosen to carry this weight alone, perhaps out of fear or shame, and had kept me in the dark about our daughter's suffering. I contacted Sophie's mother and requested clarification. She didn't provide me with much, and I knew she had been hiding much more. I made the decision to go through the courts to gain full custody of our children, and I am still fighting until this day. Please remember to like, subscribe, and enable the bell notifications. Additionally, if you could share this video, it will be very beneficial to our channel. Tell us what you'd like to hear next in the comment section. Good night, sleep tight.